Hey guys, Jonathan Mouzette here for JM Sports 100, the JM Sports Show. How is it going? I'm here to make NFL picks for Week 4 in the 2014 NFL season. We are 1-0 on the week already. We did have Atlanta beating Tampa Bay, and they did that. They thrashed them on Thursday night, 56-14. So with that win there, we are one game below 500 for the year 16 and 17 on the year, and we are 609, 383 and 2 lifetime. So there's a look at the record there. Remember, we only do pick straight up. All right, here we go. Let's get to it. Let's kick things off with San Diego and Buffalo. Very interesting matchup right here. San Diego coming off of a big win against Seattle last week. Buffalo dominated. I don't really want to say dominant because statistically they did not, but they did get the win over Miami last week. This is an interesting game here, and I've kind of flip-flopped about it because there's a lot of things to keep in mind. Chargers coming off of a big emotional win against Seattle doesn't mean that much in the NFL. Players usually are good at putting that behind them and moving on to the next game. But excuse me, that is one thing to think about. Also, another thing to think about is the travel. Um, going from west to east, and that usually affects teams. I am going to go with San Diego here, though. San Diego is just the better team, the better quarterback, just the better team. EJ Manuel is not that great right now. He's kind of being baby. They're not really throwing much at him, and I think that's kind of something to do with what Buffalo has been able to do lately. I don't think Buffalo is as a 2-0 team as people think, but so I'm going to go with San Diego in that game there. Tennessee and Cincinnati. Cincinnati dominated Atlanta last week in Cincinnati. Back to back home games for Cincinnati. I don't think that's necessarily good for Tennessee. The only saving grace that they may have is the health of or the status of AJ Green is not fully known right now. Andy Dalton has been playing some pretty good football for the first 2 weeks. I do think it continues. I've got the Bengals beating the Titans. Baltimore and Cleveland. Baltimore really impressed me on last Thursday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I said in that video that I felt like Baltimore wasn't quite where they needed to be. I think I was wrong. They were really impressive. Cleveland coming off of a big win against the Saints, of a shocker of a win that did cost us our lock of the week, by the way. I don't see Cleveland winning back to back games. I think Baltimore goes on the road and beats their AFC North foe. Next up, we have Dallas and St. Louis. Tony Romo and the Cowboys played pretty well against the Tennessee Titans last week. Meanwhile, the St. Louis Rams just barely squeaked one out against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, this is a tough game to pick just because of if you try to think about the past. Is Dallas capable? Are the Cowboys capable of putting together consecutive good games? Can they win back-to-back games? Then again, you can say the same thing about St. Louis. Can they win back-to-back games? The Cowboys seemed a little bit better last week against Tennessee. Tony Romo did not throw an interception. That was pretty good for him. Obviously, I do have the Cowboys winning this game, so putting my faith in the Cowboys to go back to back. Green Bay and Detroit is the next game here, and this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a barn burner, I think. It's a division matchup, which means it'll probably be tough as it is. The Green Bay defense is not where it should be, not even anywhere close. Really, essentially, the Packers probably should have lost to the Jets. Or at least won in overtime against the Jets last weekend. So the Packers have a lot of issues defensively. Offensively, they're okay. Meanwhile, Detroit has come out and really kind of struggled last week against Carolina. Played well in week one against the Giants, obviously. Uh, this game could go either way. I think it's a coin flip game. I'm going with the Packers to get the win. Indianapolis and Jacksonville. I'm making this my lock of the week. I'm going with Indy, obviously, if I'm making it my lock of the week. Jacksonville gave up 10 sacks to the Washington Redskins last weekend. Um, and the Colts, so obviously their offensive line is just has some major trouble. Also, the Indianapolis Colts are 0-2. They lost at the end of the game against the Eagles on Monday night by a field goal. You know they're not happy. Andrew Luck does not lose 3 games in a row. It just doesn't happen. I don't see it happening here either. I've got the Colts getting the win. I'm making that my lock of the week. Next up, we have Oakland and New England here. And New England, I watched them play. I watched a little bit of their game against the Dolphins. I watched pretty much the whole game against the Vikings last week too. And New England has some problems. New England has some defensive problems. New England has some offensive line problems. I don't think that's going to affect them here. The Oakland Raiders are still the Oakland Raiders. They aren't, I didn't think they'd be 0-2. I did feel like they'd be a little better this year. They haven't shown it yet. I don't think they're going to go into Foxborough and show it. I've got the Patriots beating the Raiders. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings and the New Orleans Saints, and I've got Saints here all the way. Okay, I don't think the Adrian Peterson thing is going to be a huge distraction for the Vikings because this is essentially the second week of having to go through that. So I don't think that's going to be a big problem. But New Orleans got embarrassed by Cleveland last weekend in Cleveland, and now they're back at home in New Orleans, a place that they dominate on any other regular day, really. So I can only imagine that playing the Saints at the Superdome when they're angry ends up even worse than just playing them on a regular day. I am going to go with the Saints in that game there. Houston and the New York Giants. I actually flip flopped on this game a little bit, and you're probably thinking, why? The Texans are 2-0, the Giants are 0-2. How hard is it? Well, it is pretty complicated because if you look at Houston, okay, Houston is not a great team. Okay, they're 2-0. Yes, they beat the Redskins and they beat up on the Raiders. And even you're like, well, the Redskins are an okay team. Yeah, with Kirk Cousins. I don't think the Redskins are as good of a team with RG3. But anyway, um, I'll get to that when I get to the Redskin game here in just next actually. Um, Meanwhile, you look at the Giants. The Giants are bad. Okay, they are bad. They're bad on the offensive line. They're bad on the defense. Their defense isn't great. Their offensive line is horrible. Manning doesn't have any protection. But um, you look at the mistakes that the Giants have made. The big mistakes for the Giants are drops. Drops can be corrected. Victor Cruz is not going to drop 5 passes again this week. Okay, I think it's a close game. Houston's traveling. Houston doesn't usually travel real well, so I am actually going reluctantly with the Giants in this football game. Next up, we have Washington and Philadelphia. Now, I flip flopped on this game too, because let's face it, guys, Philadelphia is 2-0, but it hasn't been a pretty 2-0. Week 1, you're down 17-0 to Jacksonville. Last week, you end up winning on a field goal towards the end of the game against the Colts. The Eagles have not played well, especially defensively. Okay, Kirk Cousins has shown that he can be a pretty good quarterback in this league and that he can win games. Quite frankly, my personal opinion, I think Kirk Cousins should be starting over RG3. And I can tell you that my gut feeling is when RG3 gets back from his ankle injury, if Kirk Cousins has this team winning, then Kirk Cousins will remain the starter for the Redskins. That's just my gut feeling. In my opinion, I think that's the way it should be. I do think Philadelphia wins this game, but I think it's really close. Okay, the Eagles' offensive line is kind of banged up. The Redskins' defense, like we said, got 10 sacks last week. Granted, yes, It was against the Jaguars, but the Redskins defense is a tough, tough defense. I think they're going to get some pressure on Nick Foles. I do think it's a close game. I do think the Eagles squeak it out. Next up, we have San Francisco and Arizona. I would feel more comfortable about taking Arizona in this game if Carson Palmer is playing. It's probably not going to be Carson Palmer. It'll probably be Drew Stanton again. I'm not real comfortable with that. That 49ers defense, even though they're a little bit banged up, that 49ers defense is still too good. I would certainly take Kaepernick over Stanton. I do have the 49ers beating the Cardinals. Denver and Seattle, a rematch of last year's Super Bowl. I can say this, I do think that it will be a different score from the Super Bowl last year rather, but the same result. I do think Seattle does win this game. Denver hasn't impressed me. Denver really has not impressed me for the first 2 weeks. They had it tight with the Colts. They had a hard time closing out the abysmal Kansas City Chiefs last week, and I know that's a division game, but they had trouble closing them out at home. Okay, now they have to travel to Seattle. I don't think it's going to end well for Denver. I don't think it's a blowout. I think it's a much tighter game than the Super Bowl was, but I do have the Seahawks getting the win. Speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, there in their next game as they take on the Miami Dolphins. Miami lost to Buffalo last week, and Kansas City, as we said, lost to Denver. In last week's video, I had said to Miami fans when I picked them, I apologize because you're probably going to lose. Whatever I seem to do with Miami, the opposite just seems to happen. So let me say this again, Miami fans. You're probably going to fall to 1-2 because I am going with Miami again this weekend to beat Kansas City. Miami is just the better team. Um, that's all there is to really say about it. Let's get to the Sunday night game: Pittsburgh and Carolina. Pittsburgh 1-1, Carolina 2-0. Pittsburgh did not play well against Baltimore last Thursday. I don't expect Pittsburgh to play well against Carolina this Sunday night. Pittsburgh is in major, major trouble. They have some serious issues going on there with that football team. Meanwhile, Carolina, I picked against them the first 2 weeks of the season, thinking, okay, first there was no Cam. There's no Cam in week one, and there was, well, Cam's not acclimated with his receivers. Cam and the Panthers proved me wrong both times. They're 2-0. I think they go to 3-0. I think they beat Pittsburgh. I am not stupid enough to try to doubt Carolina for a third straight week. I'm going with the Panthers. All right, that brings us to our Monday night game. Chicago Bears, New York Jets. This is going to be an interesting game. I think it's going to be a close game. Okay, I think it comes down to this because both these teams have weaknesses in the same area, such as run defense and stuff like that. I think it comes down really to quarterback. And obviously, who would you rather have, Jay Cutler or Geno Smith? And you got to go with Jay Cutler, even Jay Cutler or Michael Vick, and if they switch it up, I would still rather take Jay Cutler. I think the game is close. I think it's tight. I've got the Bears beating the Giants 27-21. Alright, guys, that is going to do it for me. My throat is starting to hurt because I've been doing a lot of talking, a lot of videos today, so I apologize if this wasn't the best work that I've done. Hopefully, we can keep improving on the record and get some more wins. Don't forget that the Indianapolis Colts over the Jacksonville Jaguars is our lock of the week. Also, don't forget to like the JM Sports Show page on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Links will be in the description as they always are. Also, for you college football fans, college football picks are already up on the channel, so if you haven't checked them out yet, please do so. That is going to do it for me. I am Jonathan Wozette for JM Sports 100 and the JM Sports Show, and I will see you guys later.